Hey guys, welcome back to the Geography Academy. Remember, this video is just a small part of a much larger course that's available below if you just follow the links and instructions. Okay, so for section 8A, it's Health, Human Rights and Intervention with Edexcel. We've got two major sections. Then the first one is Human Development and Human Rights. So we can look at the example there of the main question, what is human development and why do levels vary from place to place? So looking beyond GDP per capita, the gross domestic product of the total exports of a country, we can see that there are going to be alternative methods of measuring development. Now, I might stop you at this stage just to explain, if you haven't looked at other parts of the course before and you're just jumping into this, there's going to be sections that I'm going to move through very quick, but there are key parts of other sections like globalization, for example. So just make sure that you've studied the other sections of the course and leaving this till last. Now, the alternative measures of development, because we've looked at so many throughout the course, is something like the Happy Planet Index and looking at sustainable well-being rather than economic output. So looking at social factors like life expectancy, experience, well-being, and the ecological footprint in a region can show that some countries then have a higher development or HPI index than other areas. And we can see countries like Costa Rica ranking higher than HICs. So this means that people are more satisfied with their life, and yeah, we can see that transferring then into countries that have a higher HPI are countries that are maybe less developed as well in areas. Some countries that are less connected as well are often higher in the HDI. So for example, Philippines, Colombia being higher than countries like USA or Germany. However, we can see that this isn't applicable to all areas, such as regions with Islamic or Sharia law, and this will incorporate then the idea of religious expression as a sign of well-being in their country. So social justice over material wealth. We can see the hands-rolling perspective then, emphasis on health, life expectancy, and human rights being more important than economic output. So because of this, then we can create an environmental quality as development as well. And we can see that increase in environmental quality, decreasing the impacts of the environment on well-being and increasing the quality of life. So the economic benefits of education we can see derived from the growth and the innovation in productivity. So throughout the areas here, we can see the 90s into the 2000s and right up there until 2019. And what we can see is there's a pattern where most of the world is increasing in its rate there of the education index. This is coming from the UNDP, and we can see that there's a big increase in African nations and across Asian nations as well to catch up with other regions, and also big areas of Latin America as well, making those increases. This is a direct correlation then to the economic growth and benefits of education, and from there it brings opportunity for more foreign direct investment, more equality among genders, and more workplace opportunities. We see UNESCO then looking at education fundamentals and gender equality being attached to this. And we can see regions then where big disparities can open up. For example, in Afghanistan, then the post-Taliban takeover has seen then women and girls facing barriers to education, for example. So these are regions that may have made some advances, but then are retreating back into cultural norms. GNI then is looking at the GDP, but it's also consisting of the amount of remittances sent back by migrants. And we can see that in a collection there. So quite important, like highest GDPs here, showing a different scenario. Some countries here featured also very highly in other areas, but others then did not. We can see the GDP per capita is limited, as it shows Costa Rica and China together. And then in GNI per capita, they're a couple of countries apart, and there's a bigger gap between them of about $2,000 to $3,000 in income per capita. So the natural change in the birth rates tells us all about the demographics and the shifts. and the natural increase there. So the number of death rates can tell us a lot about things like the life expectancy, but the life expectancy is an indicator itself. These are other ways of measuring if a country then is healthy, if they have a good diet and a good system. So a country can have a low GDP per capita but a high life expectancy. However, we often see that there is a connection between the lowest GDP and the lowest life expectancy, like countries like the Central African Republic. Literacy rates then show the amount of education in the country, and usually it's up above 90%, and anything that's under sort of 80 will kind of raise alarms on the education rate and development level, as well as the life kind of standard, the standard of living for children. Infant mortality rate then can be very high in some countries, like in Sierra Leone, and very low in other countries like Iceland. We can see that this is going to be a considerable impact on our understanding of a country and a measurement of if they have good healthcare or not. So this development index then is another good indicator which combines education, life expectancy, and GNI per person, showing the difference between healthcare, education, and living standards. That map then, if we compare it to GDP, can actually identify a few areas that are more diverse once we start to take the consideration of other factors like healthcare into consideration over just simply GDP, which is the map above here. Fertility rates then can tell us a lot about a country and its change over the demographic transition model, for example. The trends in globally are that LICs have high fertility rates, MICs have slowing fertility rates, and HICs have low fertility rates. The factors that influence them then could be economic, like healthcare, food resources. So if we have enough resources, we tend to see actually fertility rates going down. And this comes down to things like high infant mortality rates, where actually higher fertility rates lead to are because of high infant mortality rates. So people will tend to continue to have children with the expectation that not all of them will make it to adulthood. The idea then with political nature is that you can have an anti or pro-natalist policy. A pro-natalist policy is trying to encourage more higher fertility rates, and anti-natal policy are trying to reduce them. Religion then can influence and forbid the use of contraceptives and abortions.